All right, amateur historian with a confession. I actually never thought that this would happen, but there's so many sections to the Doctrine and Covenants that I forgot one, which I guess would happen. There's 138 sections to the Doctrine and Covenants in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and so I kind of forgot to put this one in the full episode, so forgive me. This is its own thing. This is what I call the 24th episode supplement. This is going to be specifically just about Doctrine and Covenants, section 63. So my apologies for that. I was uploading it and I was like, wow, I totally forgot to do this section. So I'm going to do it. And of course, it's got some very interesting things. Nothing simple, of course. Um, but the first copy that we have is found in Newell K. Whitney's papers. And it's actually the handwriting of Oliver Cowdery. And I talked about this in a previous episode, but this is part of the donation that Isaac Grew donated to the Harold B. Lee Library at BYU. I believe that was in the 80s or the early 90s. But yeah, this was a collection that was kind of in their family for a while. And one of the Whitney daughters married a Grew, and it grew into a donation to the Harold B. Lee Library. So anyway, that's that. We're calling it a bifolium, meaning that there's kind of two folds to it and that they were carried that way. So there's some fold marks here, as you can see. 2 pages of text with a couple of writings on the backs of the paperwork. So way down at the bottom here, kind of upside down in this picture, you're going to see 31st August 1831, Revelation to Church and Oliver and Newell to visit Church. That's what that says. So that is the most original copy that we get. We also get a copy found in Revelation Book 1, which is sort of a standard thing, but we get it in Revelation Book 1, which is where the Book of Commandments would have taken it from. It is in Sidney Gilbert's notebook, handwriting of Sidney Gilbert there. It is also in the Evening and Morning Star, and so this is where you get that, which is actually close to a couple of non-scriptural things, kind of more of a periodical there, but that's what you get in the Evening and Morning Star. It is chapter 64 in the Book of Commandments, and it is section 20 in the 1835 Doctrine and Covenants, in the original Doctrine and Covenants. And we also find a copy of it in the Manuscript History of the Church. So that's where you can find this, as we call it now, section 63. So some introductions to this. There is no introduction besides those graphite letters that I showed on the back of the paper, meaning that Newell is going to visit the church. So just once again, the introduction here, 31 August 1831, Revelation to the Church, and Oliver and Newell to visit church. So go visit church. Revelation Book 1 gives us 65th commandment given August 13, 1831, on the bank of the river Missouri, at a meeting of some of the elders which had not yet arrived at their journeying's end, etc. We always have to say etc. So that's Revelation Book 1. Sidney Gilbert's notebook gives us simply a commandment, Revelation, received in Kirtland August 30th, 1831. So difference between 30 and 13, maybe. I know I make that mistake sometimes when I hear it. Evening and Morning Star simply gives us a revelation given August 30, 1831. So not sure which dates there are correct, but yeah, there you go. And it's very similar. That language is very similar in the Book of Commandments and the Doctrine and Covenants. The Manuscript History of the Church gives us this introduction. After this little meeting with the elders, myself and Sidney Rigdon and Oliver Cowdery continued our journey by land to St. Louis, where we overtook brothers William W. Phelps and Sidney Gilbert. From this place we took stage, and they went by water to Kirtland, where we arrived safe and well on the 27th. Many things transpired upon this journey to strengthen our faith, and which displayed the goodness of God in such a marvelous manner, that we could not help beholding the exertions of Satan to blind the eyes of the people as to hide the true light that lights every man that comes into the world. In these infant days of the church, there was a great anxiety to obtain the word of the Lord upon every subject that in any way concerned our salvation. And as the land of Zion was now the most important temporal object in view, I inquired of the Lord for further information upon the gathering of the saints and the purchase of the land and other matters, and received the following. So We get this from the historical introduction, and we're going to be reverting back to this or talking about this manuscript history throughout some of these notes. But the historical introduction gives us this. Uh, Lots of uncertainty, by the way, before we get into that, about raising funds to buy land, the state of Independence, Missouri, a lot of issues concerning members and what to do. And if you've been following along, there's a lot of minutes of meetings, and there will be a lot of minutes of meetings in the future where you're talking about people being silenced or having their licenses taken away, maybe cut off from the church, things like that. So there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of problems here. So a lot of uncertainty. We get from the historical introduction, compounding the problem of this uncertainty, Joseph Smith, Sidney Rigdon, and Oliver Cowdery discovered upon their return to Ohio that, quote, many had apostatized in their absence. Coming on the heels of the antagonism that Joseph Smith had apparently experienced from some of his company of elders on the return trip to Ohio, the knowledge that many others had fallen away was distressing. We could not help beholden, later Joseph Smith history recounts upon this time period, the exertions of Satan to blind the eyes of the people so as to hide the true light that lights every man that comes into the world. Okay, and further into the historical introduction, we also get the 30th August revelation addressed many of the issues Joseph Smith faced on his return to Kirtland, providing instruction on how those who were to move to Zion would be selected, how quickly the saints should gather to Zion, and how to prepare for Christ's return to the earth. It condemned the wicked both in and out of the church, especially sign seekers and adulterers, and appointed Newell K. Whitney and Cowdery to raise money for Zion. As Rigdon wrote the next day, the revelation gave instruction how to, quote, escape the day of tribulation which is coming on the earth. A passage in this revelation addressed the church members residing on this farm, indicating that Joseph Smith dictated the revelation on the Isaac Morley farm, where he had left his family in June, and where many of the saints traveling to Ohio in 1831 relocated. So the Morley farm was a very important place to live in. So a little bit about the introduction leading up to this. So it sounds like it was on the 30th of August, not the 13th of August. That wins. End of the month. And we're kind of getting to the end of the year, and this year's remarkable. I mean, we've been spending all of our time in 1831 for quite a while now because there's so many revelations that came out during this time. A lot of new things. So, a bit about content and footnotes. The text gives us this from the revelation, and now behold, I, the Lord, saith unto you, that ye are not justified because of these things are among you. Nevertheless, he that endureth in faith and doeth my will, the same shall overcome, and shall receive an inheritance upon the earth, when the day of transfiguration shall come, when the earth shall be transfigured, even according to the pattern which was shown unto mine apostles upon the mount, of which account the fullness ye have not yet received. So this is referring to the Mount of Transfiguration episode in the New Testament, and apparently that Joseph was working on a New Testament translation of the Bible, a New Testament revision of the Bible. And footnote 9 gives us this. This passage seems to promise further information on transfiguration. The only extant record of such comes from Joseph Smith's Bible revision, when Joseph Smith revised Matthew chapter 17, verses 1 through 13, sometime between the 7th of April and the 9th of June in 1831. He added clarifying information about the identity and mission of Elias, who appeared on the mount at the time that Christ was transfigured. So that is the Joseph Smith translation at work. This idea that apparently the earth itself will be transfigured at some point, or that its physical state will be changed, which is what happened to apparently Elijah or Elias, excuse me, very different people. So yeah, that's what that is. Further down into the revelation we get, and now behold, this is the will of the Lord your God concerning his saints, that they should assemble themselves together unto the land of Zion, not in haste, lest there should be confusion, which bringeth pestilence. And I've always wondered about this. So here is a definition of pestilence from the Joseph Smith paper footnote 12 to this. It says, according to Webster's 1828 dictionary, pestilence denotes not only infectious disease, but also corruption or moral disease destructive to happiness. And that makes a lot more sense to me because for the longest time I was like, if we're confused, we're gonna die from the flu or something. No, it's not just diseases. It apparently also refers to sort of a moral decay that can happen. That makes a lot more sense. Okay, yeah, we're all over the place, and so we're gonna make up our own rules, and it's gonna fall apart. So a little definition of pestilence that might be good to know. It's not always about disease. So that was I don't know why I was so kind of relieved to hear that because I was like that just it sounded like it didn't make a whole lot of sense. So anyway, my personal things coming out here, I guess. Um, Further into the text we get, behold, I the Lord will give unto my servant Joseph power that he shall be enabled to discern by the Spirit those who shall go up unto the land of Zion, and those of my disciples that shall tarry. So out of footnote 23, to clarify this, says, an earlier revelation in August indicated that not all elders were to migrate to Missouri at once, stating that some were not to receive their inheritance in Zion for many years. This same revelation also indicated that conferences of elders would help regulate who moved to Missouri. Here, Joseph Smith receives instruction that he should decide who will go and who will stay in Kirtland, Ohio. Therefore, at least two parties, Joseph Smith and conferences of elders, had authority to make such decisions. The day after this revelation was dictated, Joseph Smith dictated another by the voice of the Spirit, indicating that John Burke, David Eliot, and Erastus Babbitt should journey this fall into the land of Zion. A few months later, Reynolds Cahoon appeared before a conference of elders to receive direction on whether to go or stay. So you got these two groups. Joseph Smith himself and a conference of elders can say, okay, who's living in Kirtland, who's living in Independence? That was the plan. And yeah, we get that John Burke, David Eliot, Erastus Babbitt revelation. Very small scrap of paper we've already spoken to, but that's one example of how these things were doled out. Was sort of a direction from the prophet or from the elders. Further still into the content we get, and now speedily go with or visit the churches, expounding these things unto them with my servant Oliver Cowdery. Behold, this is my will with obtaining monies, even as I have directed. He that is faithful and endureth shall overcome the world. He that sendeth up treasures unto the land of Zion shall receive an inheritance in this world, and his works shall follow him, and also a reward in the world to come. So a lot of incentives for sending money to Zion, to Independence. Footnote 27 of this says, according to Sidney Rigdon, Cowdery and Whitney would read to the saints the revelations touching on the way and means of possessing the land of Zion as they visited the churches. John Whitmer later recorded that, quote, the disciples truly opened their hearts to Cowdery and Whitney, enabling them to obtain money for the purpose of buying lands for the saints according to the commandments. We get a warning to President Rigdon at the time, or maybe it was just Sidney. I don't know if he was called President Rigdon at the time. Yeah, but anyway, a warning to Rigdon. It says this in the Revelation. And now behold, verily I say unto you, I the Lord am not pleased with my servant Sidney Rigdon. He exalteth himself in his heart, and received not counsel, but grieved the Spirit. Wherefore his writing is not acceptable unto the Lord, and he shall make another. And if the Lord receive it not, behold, he standeth no longer in the office which he hath appointed him. Yikes. The writing, this thing, we've talked about this in a previous episode of like, he wrote some description of Zion, and apparently it was super bad that you get this like revelation from it. So footnote 36, thanks to Ezra Booth being no longer in good terms with the church, gives us a lot more detail than maybe people would otherwise. So actually, I'm very grateful for this guy. Ezra Booth, who had become disaffected from the church by this time, implied that Rigdon had exaggerated the character of the land in his first draft of the description of Zion, which a 1st of August 1831 revelation had commanded him to write. According to Booth, Rigdon's description differed markedly from the one that Edward Partridge had composed. In 1844, Jedediah M. Grant, who was not acquainted with Rigdon in 1831, declared that, quote, men of the strictest veracity had told him that Rigdon's original draft was, quote, extravagant in its description of the upper country. According to Grant, Rigdon expatiated on the beauties of Jackson County in such a profuse manner that fears were entertained by the brethren that it would cause the saints from the east to apostatize as soon as they should arrive, not finding things as set forth by Elder R. Elder R. A little heavy on the sauce there, and yeah, apparently the description that he wrote was way too flowery and so far off base that they were afraid that people were going to leave the church, which I find really funny. Anyway, so the last portion of this, as you can see, is a nice little frill at the end, which is fun to watch, and that is my apology. I am so sorry. I totally forgot section 63. All is well now. I'm an honest man, and so here's the amateur historian saying, very sorry about that. You get an extra episode. Blessed are you, and have a good week. We'll see you next time.